In today's video, I'm going to tell you all 30 more Nintendo Switch games you can get physically that I recommend. A few quick things before we get into today's video. Number one, because there's 30 different Nintendo Switch games that we're going to be going through, we're going to be going through them relatively quickly. There may or may not be any gameplay or B-roll on the screen. It really just depends on how long I talk about each game. Number two, there's two things that I want you to get out of this video. There's two reasons why I'm doing this video. Number one, primary reason, is to introduce you to Nintendo Switch games that maybe you've never heard of that are awesome games that you should check out. Number two, for all of you collectors out there, I'm hoping that this video will introduce you to Nintendo Switch games that have physical copies that you maybe didn't know had physical copies. Now, one thing that you do want to keep in mind with these games in today's video, these are all going to be limited release games from companies like Limited Run Games, Super Rare Games, East Asia Soft, all those different companies. So unfortunately, if you want to snag a copy of these games, you're going to have to get them on eBay, and it's probably going to cost quite a bit. Now, even though these games are expensive physically, if you just want to play the game and you don't care about collecting the physical version, you can get all of these games digitally on the Nintendo Switch eShop, and a lot of them are probably pretty cheap digitally too, especially some of the games that have been out for a while. So if you don't want to spend gobs of money on the physical edition and you just want to play the games, then hit up the Nintendo Switch eShop. With all that out of the way, let's go ahead and jump into the first game. First game I want to talk about coming at you from East Asia Soft is the Oniken plus Odalis collection. These are awesome retro-inspired indie games. Oniken is more like a game like Contra or Vice Project Doom, a game along those lines, whereas Odalis is going to remind you of old school Castlevania games. They're both really difficult games, but they really preserve that retro style, and they're freaking awesome, so check them out. Next up from East Asia Soft is Reverie Sweet As Edition. This is an amazing game. This game sort of reminds me of a cross between Earthbound and The Legend of Zelda. It has that kind of Earthbound art style and just weirdness to it, combined with the gameplay of a Legend of Zelda game, and it has really awesome retro-inspired visuals, music, and gameplay. So if you like Zelda or you like Earthbound, then check out Reverie Sweet As Edition. Next up from Super Rare Games is the Adventure Pals. This game is a lot of fun. It's a 2D action platformer with the visual and comedic style and storytelling style of Adventure Time. This game will definitely remind you of Adventure Time. It's very clearly inspired by Adventure Time. The gameplay is a lot of fun. It's a fairly long game too, and I really enjoyed it, and I recommend checking it out. So, the Adventure Pals. Next up from Super Rare Games is a very strange 3D platformer called Snake Pass. Now, what makes this game unique is that it's a 3D platformer where you never actually jump. You navigate these 3D environments looking for objects and collectibles, controlling a snake exactly like you would think a snake would control in a video game. You have to literally slither up things to navigate the environment. The controls are very awkward and strange at first, but once it clicks and once you get used to them, you'll find it to be a very fascinating way to play a video game. So that's Snake Pass. Now, some of the games in today's video, a lot of you have heard about, I'm sure. Like The Messenger, for instance. This is a very well-known indie game. It's a retro-inspired 2D action-adventure indie game, very much inspired by the 8 and 16-bit era, in particular, the Ninja Gaiden games. This game is a lot of fun, amazing music, amazing visuals, amazing gameplay, and it also is hard as balls. So if you like a challenge, and you like old-school retro games, and you like a Ninja Gaiden, you're going to love The Messenger. Another one that is relatively well known is the Hotline Miami collection. This includes both Hotline Miami 1 and 2, and it is a top-down, extremely intense, action-packed game where you use guns and melee weapons to fight your way through a bunch of enemies, but the catch is you die in one hit. It's extremely intense, it's extremely difficult, but when you overcome a level that you've died on dozens and dozens and dozens of times, feeling of gratification from that is amazing. So check out the Hotline Miami collection. NEUROVDIDER is a sort of twin-stick shooter combined with a roguelike that you can play with 1 to 4 players, and it's a lot of fun. You play as this little robot, you get all these different power-ups as you play through the game, just like any good roguelike. Procedurally generated environments, every run is going to be different, and it's a lot of fun to play cooperatively, especially local co-op. Actually, you can only play this local co-op. So if you have a bunch of friends and you like twin-stick shooters and roguelikes, then you're going to want to check out NEUROVDIDER. Velocity 2X is a very interesting and unique game because it's sort of like a side-scrolling action platformer combined with a shoot-'em-up, but every level is designed to speedrun it as fast as possible. Now, you don't have to try to speedrun the levels, but they're designed in such a way to where it's a speedrunner's dream. It is a very fast-paced, action-packed game. It's a lot of fun. It's pretty difficult, and I recommend checking it out. Velocity 2X. Fox and Forests. This is an incredible 2D action-adventure platformer game where you play as a little fox, playing through a lot of different levels, fighting bosses and enemies, exploring, gaining new power-ups, using spells. It has that very 16-bit style. It has some RPG and puzzle elements to it. It is a really, really fun game. It's a little difficult, but not too bad. And it's a game that nobody ever talks about, which is a shame. So if you like 16-bit action-adventure 2D games, then check out Fox and Forests. CHASM. This is one of the games that I beat in 2021. Amazing freaking game. It is a 2D action-adventure Metroidvania game. You get a ton of freaking weapons. There's a ton of enemies to fight, bosses to explore, abilities to gain, thus enabling you to explore more areas. Pretty challenging game, but it's a lot of fun. So if you like Metroidvanias, then you're going to want to check out CHASM. Wizard of Legend is a really fun roguelike that can be played cooperatively with up to 2 players. You play as a wizard, and because it's a roguelike, it's procedurally generated. You're going to have different spells and different abilities and powers that you get each run. This is a really good roguelike, and this is one that I don't hear a lot of people talking about. There's a lot of spell combos you can get. There's over 100 different spells. Really awesome game, so be sure and check out Wizard of Legend. Blasphemous. This is an amazing game. One of my favorite indie games on the Switch. It is a 2D action-adventure Metroidvania style game, but it also has some Dark Souls elements to it as well. It definitely gives you off a really strong Dark Souls vibe, and it's brutally difficult. The freaking pixel art is gorgeous. The animations are amazing. It is just such an incredible game. I had such a blast playing through it. Incredible boss fights. Fun to explore the world. So if you like 2D games and you like Metroidvanias and you like Dark Souls or any type of Souls-like game, you're gonna love Blasphemous. Duck Game. This game is insane. If you're looking for a game to play with 1 to 4 players where you can have a lot of fun shooting each other with all sorts of wacky weapons in these arenas as ducks and laughing your ass off, then you're going to want to check out Duck Game. It's an amazing party game. Think of something like Towerfall Ascension, except you're playing as ducks and you're using a lot of guns and melee weapons. It's very chaotic. It's very over the top. It's hilarious. So if you're looking for a good time with some friends, then check out Duck Game. TIMESPINNER. This is an incredible 2D action-adventure game with incredible pixel art, retro pixel art graphics, and it can be played cooperatively with up to 2 players, and it is a Metroidvania, but it sort of has a Castlevania feel to it as well, and it involves time traveling. Very unique game, very, very awesome, and it's one that I never hear anybody talk about. So if you're a fan of Metroidvanias, if you're a fan of Castlevania in particular, then you need to check out TIMESPINNER, because I think you're really going to enjoy this game. This is another relatively well-known indie game because it's been around for a while, and that's Rogue Legacy. Now, in case you can't tell by the title, this is a roguelike game where you play as a little knight and you explore a massive castle, fighting enemies, fighting boss fights, avoiding obstacles. Each run you're going to get different weapons and abilities and power-ups. But the funny catch with this game is every run you start over as a new character that's like a family member or a son of the character before, and each character has their own strange quirks that affect you in the run that could hurt you negatively or positively. And of course, each time you start a new run, it's procedurally generated. Amazing roguelike game. So if you're a fan of the genre and you've never played Rogue Legacy, then I highly recommend checking it out. Super Meat Boy is probably one of the most well-known indie games because it is one of the indie games that really put indie games on the map and propelled them into mass popularity. Super Meat Boy is an incredibly difficult 2D platformer that requires twitch reflexes. You're going to play through these very quick micro levels with just pinpoint accuracy control, very fast paced. A single mistake and you're going to die. The levels can usually be cleared in a matter of seconds, but there's hundreds and hundreds of them. It's a very brutally difficult game, but when you conquer a level that you've died on maybe 100 times or more, it feels good. So if you like challenging 2D platformers, then check out Super Meat Boy. ICONOCLASTS is a beautiful 2D action-adventure game with some light Metroidvania elements to it, with a great story, fantastic pixel art, really fun combat with a lot of cool, fun abilities that you get in the game, and it was a joy to play. And it's another game that I never hear anybody talk about. So if you're looking for a really fun, retro-inspired 2D action-adventure game, then you got to check out ICONOCLASTS. FURI is a very unique game because it's sort of a boss rush game. You're going to be fighting a series of increasingly difficult boss battles, and in between each boss battle you will navigate a very trippy environment, but it's from a very cinematic style, the way the camera moves and the different camera shots as you're navigating these environments between boss battles, and it sort of builds up that tension between boss battles to where you know when you get close to that boss it's time to get ready. And the boss fights are extremely difficult. They're multifaceted, multi-phase boss fights that require extreme skill and multiple tries to defeat them, and when you overcome a boss that has been giving you a lot of trouble, it feels really good. So I highly recommend FURI. The combat's a lot of fun, and if you like challenging boss fights, you're gonna love this game because that's all this game is challenging boss fights. Yooka-Laylee, another very well-known indie game. This is the spiritual successor to Banjo-Kazooie and Banjo-Tooie, with a lot of the original developers from Rare that worked on those incredible 3D platforming masterpieces. And this is a very good 3D platformer. It will give you that Banjo-Kazooie and Banjo-Tooie feel. It has the same sort of art style, the same gameplay. It just has different characters, a different setting, different story, but it's an incredible game. If you love 3D platformers, this is one of the best out there right now, in my opinion, on modern consoles. So be sure and check out Yooka-Laylee. Dust: An Elysian Tale is a 2D action-adventure game with an absolutely gorgeous hand-drawn art style with both the character models and the environments themselves. It really looks like a beautiful kind of hand-painted art. It's a really beautiful game to see. The combat is a lot of fun. The exploration is a lot of fun. It has a really good story. So it's a awesome game, and it's another one I never hear anybody talk about. So if you like 2D action-adventure games, especially games with hand-drawn, beautiful art styles, then you're going to want to check out Dust: An Elysian Tale. West of Loathing. This game is freaking incredible. It is a 2D RPG, but it's also a Western, and it has a stick figure art style, a very simplistic stick figure art style, but it is a lot of fun to play. The game has a lot of depth to it. The RPG battle system is a lot of fun, and the art style, while it's simplistic, it's also very impressive at the same time, and it's visually striking. But the best thing about West of Loathing is that it is absolutely hilarious. Seriously, folks, this is one of the funniest games I've ever played. No joke. This game throws jokes at you just non-stop. It's just a barrage of jokes, and the comedic style of this game is sort of like a good slapstick comedy. So think movies like The Naked Gun or Airplane or Scary Movie. Any good slapstick comedy you can think of, that is the style of comedy in West of Loathing. So if you like RPGs, if you like westerns, and you like slapstick comedies, you're gonna love West of Loathing. So I highly recommend checking it out. Next up is Oxenfree. This is sort of a 2D adventure game with point and click elements to it, but it has a really good story. It has voice acting, a lot of really interesting characters. It's a very mysterious, sort of supernatural sci-fi kind of story that plays out between these groups of young adults, or they might be teenagers. I think they're young adults. It's a really good game, and I don't typically like games like this. I'm not a big point and click person, but Oxenfree really pulled me in with the story. It was compelling enough to keep my attention, and I recommend checking it out. While I would highly recommend, if you have a VR headset, whether it's the PlayStation VR or the Oculus Quest, I would recommend playing the VR version of Thumper. But if you don't have a VR headset and you have a Nintendo Switch, then the Switch version is just fine. This is a really hard game to explain. It's sort of a psychedelic, super intense, fast-paced rhythm game where you play as a beetle that moves along a track at super fast speeds in a nightmarish psychedelic hellscape, and you're trying to survive and do different actions on this track in the rhythm of this very kind of chaotic music. It's a hard game to explain, but it's incredible, and it is a rush to play this game, especially in VR. But even if you're not playing in VR, it's a rush. It's very intense, especially as you get towards the later levels where it gets even faster and there's more actions you have to pull off as you play. Again, it's hard to explain. You just gotta trust me on this. Check out Thumper. Kingdom New Lands. This is another game that's really hard to explain. You move across in a 2D environment as you're exploring and you're gaining resources and you're constructing things. I really don't know how to explain this game, but it's very compelling. And the gameplay is very simplistic, but it also has a lot of depth to it at the same time. But it's sort of a sim, but not. I'll be honest, I don't know how the hell to explain this game. You're seeing gameplay footage while I talk. Hopefully that sort of explains it, but you can look it up to learn more. I haven't played it in a while, which is probably why I'm having a hard time articulating what this game plays like. But I found it to be very interesting, and I got sort of hooked on it and ended up playing it for several hours the first time that I checked it out. So if my horrible explanation sounds interesting to you, then check out Kingdom New Lands. Slime Sand Super Slime Edition. This game is very similar to Super Meat Boy, but with some slightly different controls and gameplay mechanics, but it's that same style of game where it's a very hardcore but fast-paced 2D platformer with short levels, but it requires twitch reflexes. But it has a different art style. It's a very striking art style. I really enjoyed it quite a bit. The game is hard. It's a hard game. So if you like games like Super Meat Boy, then you're gonna like Slime Sand, so check it out. FLINTHOOK is a roguelike 2D action-adventure game where you play as this little guy, and a lot of the gameplay and combat mechanics revolve around a grappling hook, using it to navigate the environments and avoid enemies and obstacles during combat. It's a lot of fun. It's a hard game. Just like any good roguelike, every time you die and start over, you're going to make progression. So future runs will get easier and easier. But if you like roguelikes, especially some with some unique gameplay mechanics, then you're going to want to check out FLINTHOOK. Mercenary Kings Reloaded is an awesome 2D side-scrolling shoot-'em-up game that's going to remind you of games like Contra and Metal Slug, and it can be played with 1 to 4 players. It's probably going to remind you of more Metal Slug than Contra, but it's a really, really fun game, and it's a great game to play cooperatively for some local co-op, and it's pretty challenging as well. So if you like games like Metal Slug and Contra, then you're going to want to check out Mercenary Kings Reloaded. And the final game that we're going to talk about in today's video is Thimbleweed Park. This is a classic point-and-click adventure game, and it's a game that a lot of you probably already know about. It's one of the more famous point-and-click adventure games out there. Now, as I stated earlier with Oxenfree, I'm not typically a big fan of point-and-click adventure games, but the story and voice acting in this game really pulled me in. It has sort of a Twin Peaks vibe to it. It's a very mysterious, there's mysterious things going on in this town, and you explore playing as various characters to try to unravel this mystery and figure out what's going on. The puzzles are very devious to figure out. It's a challenging game. It's a game you may have to look up a walkthrough for at times, but if you like point-and-click adventure games, this is probably one of the best out there, so check it out. Well, there you have it, folks. 30 more physical Nintendo Switch games that I highly recommend that you check out, whether you check them out physically or digitally. These are all awesome games that I love and I recommend to you. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure and hit that like button. Let me know in the comments down below if you've played or own any of these games, and let me know what you think about them. Also, let me know in the comments down below if there's any like sort of obscure physical or even digital Switch games that you recommend that I should consider covering in a future video. If this video does well, I may do a follow-up video where I either cover more physical Switch games or I cover some digital games that I have that don't have a physical edition, or maybe I just don't have the physical edition. So let me know if that's something you would be interested in the comments down below. Folks, as always, stay safe out there, keep playing games and having a good time, and I will catch you all in the next video. Later. If you made it to the end of this video, thank you so much. You're freaking awesome. And if you enjoyed it, hit that like button, share it with your friends and family. Check out all the social media links in the description down below. And if you want to see more Retro Wolf 88 videos, here's a couple more for you. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to go play some more video games. Later.